The great hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with refracted starlight from the vast crystalline dome above, a deliberate architectural boast that every corner of the galaxy could be seen from its heart. Delegates of 100 species filled the chamber's tiers, their voices rising in a multilingual storm. At the center, on the polished obsidian floor, the human's place sat conspicuously empty, its small podium looking like a child's toy among the towering lecterns of larger empires. The first marshal of the Zelrith Empire, a creature of angular armor plates and crimson eyes, leaned forward. "We have entertained this farce long enough." His voice boomed in a translator's crisp monotone. "Humans," he made the word sound like a disease, "are spectators, not warriors. Their fleets are laughably small, their soldiers fragile. And still they speak of alliance, as if they are our equals." Ripples of approval ran through the alien ranks. A Sierroth general, her chitinous limbs tapping in rhythm, joined in. They hide behind treaties and words while others bleed against the Kravos Swarm. When war calls, they send diplomats, not fighters. Cowards, all of them. The human ambassador, Elara Voss, stood slowly. She was not tall by alien standards, nor armored in natural plates, yet the deliberate calm of her movements drew reluctant attention. "We hear your words," she said evenly. "We hear them clearly." From the upper tiers, a Lethari warlord scoffed. "Then act, Terran. The swarm takes worlds even now. Show us the metal you claim to have." Alara's eyes moved across the assembly, unreadable. "You require a demonstration," she said. "You will have one." Without another word, she left the podium, the council erupting behind her in laughter, protest, and a few murmurs of uncertainty. Far from the grandeur of the council chambers, in a reinforced hangar beneath the gray soil of Luna, a single figure sat in quiet readiness. Commander Jack Stratton adjusted the straps on his tactical vest, each motion practiced to the point of thoughtlessness. Decades of discipline lay in the precise way his gear sat on his body. Rifle balanced for immediate draw, sidearm snug at his hip, knives where his hands could find them without looking. Across from him, a Rottweiler named Rex sat patiently, his eyes never leaving Jack's. Elara approached, the sound of her boots sharp in the metallic stillness. "They called us cowards," she said. Jack didn't look up. "Good." Her brow tightened. "You don't seem offended." "Offense wastes energy," he replied, sliding a magazine into place. "They've drawn a picture in their heads of what humans are. My job's to burn it." She placed a slim data chip on the table beside him. "Kravos movements, council politics, allied force compositions. Memorize it. You're deploying to Krylos 4. Jack glanced at the chip, but didn't reach for it yet. "And what exactly do you want me to do there?" "Make them regret underestimating us." He gave a small nod, like a man agreeing to a weather report. "How much support?" Her pause was deliberate. "None." For the first time, he looked at her. "One man." "One man," she confirmed. "One man is all it will take, if it's the right one." The hangar lights caught the faintest curve of a smile on his lips. Then they're about to learn a new word for fear. Hours later, the stealth corvette Ghost Knife slid from its cradle, stars spilling across its hull as Luna fell away behind it. Jack sat in the cockpit, Rex sprawled on the deck beside him, the steady thrum of the engines the only sound. He reviewed the mission details in silence. Infiltration of the forward base on Krylos 4, proximity to active swarm territory, unlimited operational freedom. No chain of command, no one to answer to but the outcome. The journey gave him time to think, though he disliked thinking about the past. Every medal he'd earned came with the names of people who hadn't made it home. Out here, among alien fleets and enemy worlds, there was no room for nostalgia. The galaxy didn't care about his history. It would judge only results. Krylos 4 appeared as a bruised sphere in the viewport, its atmosphere stained with the smoke of countless battles. The orbital staging ground was a tangled lattice of alien ships, sleek predator-like frigates, bulbous carriers, and blunt fortress stations bristling with weaponry. As Ghost Knife approached, docking protocols lit up with aggressive precision. The idea of a single human vessel arriving here clearly confused them. A tall, slate-skinned officer of the Zelrith met Jack at the airlock, flanked by guards in ceremonial armor. "You are the representative from Earth?" The pause carried disbelief. "Commander Stratton," Jack said simply, stepping onto the deck with Rex at his side. The officer's gaze flicked to the dog, then back. "Where is your unit?" "You're looking at it." One of the guards laughed openly, a clicking, insectal sound. "This is your answer to the swarm?" A man and his beast. Jack's expression didn't change. "You have numbers. I have results." The officer's jaw tightened, but he gestured toward a cluster of holographic displays. "Briefing at 07. You'll be assigned to an observation post." Jack shook his head once. "No assignments. I work alone." The laughter returned, this time from the other side of the deck. "Or not all," someone taunted. Jack didn't even glance toward the voice. "You'll see," he said, his tone neither boast nor threat, just a statement of inevitability. Later, in the dim quarters they'd grudgingly given him, Jack unpacked his gear in silence. Rex settled near the door, ears alert to every passing sound. The mission was already clear in Jack's mind. Find the swarm's weakness, hit it relentlessly, make the galaxy watch. They had called his people cowards because they didn't understand the nature of human war. They would. Outside, the war drums of alien fleets beat in preparation for another costly assault. Inside, Jack ran a final systems check on his rifle and whispered a single word to Rex. The dog's tail gave one quiet thump in reply. By morning, he would be gone from the base, slipping into the contested jungles below without ceremony. The Council might think of humans as background noise in the grand chorus of galactic war, but when Jack moved, the noise would stop. He intended to make sure of it. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a thought settled into his mind like a sharpened blade. Fear wasn't the absence of courage. It was the recognition of something unstoppable. And before this war was over, they would all recognize it when they saw him. The descent to Kravos 4 was made in silence. Through the Corvette's forward canopy, the planet's surface loomed, a swirling canvas of emerald jungle and blackened craters where battles had burned the land raw. Jack sat in the pilot's chair, one gloved hand steady on the controls, the other resting on his thigh. Rex stood braced beside him, nails clicking faintly against the deck as turbulence shivered through the hull. The air down there, Jack knew, would be thick with humidity and the metallic tang of old blood. As the Corvette broke through the clouds, the forward command base came into view, a sprawling bastion of alloy and shield emitters perched on a ridge above the steaming canopy. Landing platforms jutted out like the arms of a fortress reaching into the sky. Already, the comms crackled with clipped alien voices directing his approach. They had been warned he was coming, but the tone was that of someone humoring a pointless exercise. The docking clamps locked with a thud. Jack descended the ramp to find a reception party waiting. Zelrith officers in their segmented armor. A few Siroth tacticians with their insectal limbs folded in contempt, and a scattering of other species whose names he didn't bother to remember. Their expressions varied from suspicion to outright disdain. A broad-shouldered Zelrith commander stepped forward, his crest plates glinting. "Human, I am Commander Rex. You will be assigned to Auxiliary Sector 9. You will remain there until given orders." Jack kept walking until he was close enough for the alien to smell the oil and steel on his gear. "No." Threx's eyes narrowed, the red glow within them deepening. "You will follow protocol." "I will follow the mission," Jack replied, voice even. "And my mission isn't sitting behind a wall waiting for someone else to bleed." There was a ripple of derision from the gathered officers. One CA Roth clicked her mandibles in a harsh rhythm. "Perhaps you wish to prove your species' bravery by dying early. The swarm will oblige you." Jack met her stare. "They'll try." Threx exhaled slowly, as if dismissing a troublesome child. "Do what you wish. But if you die outside the perimeter, it will not be on my conscience." Jack didn't answer. He simply turned toward the hangar bay, where dropships came and went, Rex at his heel. His movements were unhurried but deliberate, the way of a man who had long ago stopped caring about permission. That night, the base lay under a dome of humming shields, casting a faint azure glow over the parade grounds. Inside the barracks, soldiers of various species cleaned weapons, patched armor, and told war stories thick with exaggeration. Jack didn't join them. Instead, he sat at a small workbench in a dim corner, methodically checking his rifle's action, ensuring every click and slide felt right. Rex lay beside him, head on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. He'd already memorized the terrain maps of the surrounding region. Dense triple-canopy jungle, jagged basalt ridges, and river systems swollen from constant rain. The Kravos held the lowlands, burrowed into nests of organic fortifications. They were methodical predators, but they had blind spots, patterns in patrols, vulnerabilities in supply lines. Jack's task wasn't to charge headlong at them. It was to unravel them thread by thread until the whole thing collapsed. At 0200 hours, he moved. No announcement, no request for transport. He geared up, slung his rifle, and left by a maintenance gate with Rex padding silently behind. The shield shimmered briefly as they passed through, then the jungle swallowed them. The first thing that struck him was the noise, an endless layering of alien wildlife calls, from deep resonant bellows to insectal whines. The second was the heat, clinging to his skin under the armor despite the night. Jack moved like a shadow through the undergrowth, each step placed with precision to avoid snapping a branch or rustling leaves unnecessarily. Rex stayed close, his ears swiveling to catch sounds beyond human range. They reached their first vantage point before dawn, a basalt outcrop overlooking a Kravos forward position. Through his scope, Jack studied the enemy camp. The swarm soldiers were insectoid in build, but moved with unsettling coordination, their black chitin glinting faintly in the camp's bioluminescent glow. He noted weapon emplacements, guard rotations, and the subtle pulse of what might be a communication relay. He didn't engage. Not yet. Instead, he planted a pair of micro-trackers under the cover of darkness, their signals already whispering back to the ghost knife in orbit. From there, human analysts could map movements and identify weak points. The aliens at the base wouldn't know it, but the war had already begun to shift in their favor. By the time the twin suns rose, Jack and Rex had circled back toward the base, entering from a different angle to avoid notice. Still, word had spread that the human had gone beyond the perimeter. Some soldiers glanced at him with curiosity now, others with disbelief that he'd returned at all. Rex intercepted him near the command center. "You were outside the shield." Jack unslung his rifle and began cleaning it without breaking stride. "And yet here I am." The Zelrith commander's crest plates rattled in irritation. "If you're caught, no one will recover your body." Jack gave a faint shrug. "Then they won't have to feed me." The day passed in the rhythm of a military post between battles. Drills, resupply runs, distant thunder of artillery in the jungle. Jack watched it all, saying little, absorbing how the different species worked or failed to work together. Coordination was brittle here. Trust was thinner than the air above the canopy. That would matter. That night, he slipped out again, this time deeper. The Kravos had sent a patrol into the highlands, likely to scout for flanking routes. Jack followed them from a distance, letting Rex's nose keep the trail even when the swarm soldiers vanished into the undergrowth. At the right moment, he closed the gap. It was quick. A suppressed shot to the lead scout, a knife across the secondary's throat, the rest falling in a silent cascade of calculated violence. No wasted movement, no unnecessary noise. When it was done, he dragged the bodies into a ravine where the jungle would claim them. He left no trace except the absence of the patrol, which would force the swarm to wonder. By the time he returned to the base, dawn was breaking again, painting the clouds in copper and violet. Rex was waiting for him, flanked by a Sierroth officer whose antennae twitched with barely contained hostility. "You were seen," Rex said. Jack met his gaze evenly. "By who?" The Sierroth clicked her mandibles. "By the enemy. And yet, you returned." "Observant," Jack said, brushing past them. They let him go, though the Sierroth's eyes followed him like a predator weighing its options. He could feel the shift beginning, not in their words, but in the subtle recalculation behind their stares. They were starting to understand he wasn't here to play by their rules. That evening, he stood at the edge of the landing platform, looking out over the jungle. Rex sat beside him, head tilted toward the distant, low roar of something large moving through the canopy. The war was all around them, pressing closer with each passing hour, but Jack felt no rush. Precision took time. Fear, once seated, grew fastest when the enemy couldn't see the hand that planted it. Below, the alien armies marshaled for another push into swarm territory, banners and armor glinting under the platform lights. Jack knew their tactics: advance in force, crush resistance with overwhelming numbers. It worked until it didn't. Against the swarm, it had been a costly stalemate for years. He reached down to scratch behind Rex's ears. "We'll show them another way," he murmured. The dog gave a quiet huff, as if in agreement. When night fell again, Jack disappeared into the jungle without a word, his silhouette swallowed by the dark. Somewhere out there, the swarm was moving, and he intended to be the shadow they never saw until it was too late. The first explosion came just before dawn, a muted blossom of orange deep in the jungle where no friendly forces were supposed to be. From the command deck of the forward base, alien officers scrambled to update their tactical maps, shifting units to investigate. By the time they had triangulated the blast site, a second eruption tore through another location, this one destroying a Kravos munitions cache. No one had seen the attacker. No one had heard the approach. Jack moved through the undergrowth like he was part of it, the moisture beading on his skin, the smell of burnt chitin still faint in the air from the first strike. Rex padded ahead, weaving between ferns, his ears twitching at every subtle movement. The charges had been set with precision, each one using a fragment of scavenged alien tech adapted into something more destructive in the right hands. Jack's hands. He didn't linger at either site. The point wasn't to rack up a body count. It was to warp the swarm's sense of safety, to make them question their own control of the terrain. Every destroyed cache meant resupply delays. Every silent patrol disappearance meant more resources poured into searching the wrong places. By mid-morning, the Kravos had shifted to emergency communications protocols. Jack intercepted enough signals to know they thought they were dealing with multiple strike teams. That suited him fine. If they believed an entire human special forces detachment was embedded in the jungle, they'd start making mistakes. He and Rex took shelter in a hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree, its trunk so wide it blocked out the sky. Jack ate in silence, chewing ration bars with methodical detachment. Every moment he wasn't moving was spent listening for the low drone of Kravos flyers, for the staccato clicks of their scouts, for the unnatural silences that meant something was close. In the afternoon, he moved toward the ridge where his trackers had been sending the strongest data bursts. Through the scope, he saw a Kravos relay node, an organic structure pulsing faintly with light, connected by cables of living tissue to burrowed command chambers below. The node was lightly guarded. They thought its location was secret. That arrogance would cost them. Jack studied the approach, marking the sentry positions. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of Kravos, dry, bitter, with a metallic undertone. Rex's hackles rose, but he stayed perfectly still. When Jack moved, it was fast and final. A suppressed rifle shot dropped the first sentry. A thrown blade silenced the second before it could turn. The relay's outer membrane tore open under the blast of a shaped charge, spraying a viscous fluid across the ground. Inside, the light pulsed erratically, then died, the whole structure collapsing in on itself. From somewhere deeper in the nest, the swarm's alarm signals rang out. Jack was already gone, melting into the shadows. Back at the base, the alien officers were starting to connect the dots. Reports of sabotaged fuel depots, missing patrols, and now a destroyed relay had all come within the same 48 hours. Commander Threx paced the command deck, his crest plates rattling in agitation. "This is unsustainable," he said to no one in particular. "The swarm's momentum is breaking, and we don't even know who is doing it." One of the CA Roth tacticians glanced up from console. "We know," she said quietly. "We just don't want to admit it." Rex turned sharply. "You mean the human?" She clicked her mandibles. "Who else moves like that?" Far from the base, Jack was planting his next trap. A series of monofilament lines stretched across a narrow game trail the Kravos used for moving supplies. He fixed each line with a small, near-invisible charge. When triggered, the blast wouldn't just kill, it would dismember, leaving no bodies intact enough for study. That was deliberate. He wanted the swarm uncertain about what they were facing. That night, the jungle echoed with distant detonations and the chittering panic of Kravos scouts calling for reinforcements. Jack listened from a concealed perch high in a tree, watching the flicker of bioluminescent armor far below. Rex rested beside him, head tilted as if gauging the right moment to move. When they did move, it was toward an enemy-forward bunker tucked against the base of a cliff. Jack approached from above, scaling the rock face in silence. From the cliff's edge, he dropped a grenade directly into the bunker's main hatch. The blast rolled upward, throwing dust and shrapnel into the night air. Before the echoes faded, he was gone again. The next morning, alien scouts reported that entire sectors of Kravos activity had gone silent. Patrols were refusing to move without reinforcement, and supply convoys had ground to a halt. Rex called for an emergency war council, and for the first time since Jack had arrived, they summoned him to attend. He walked into the council chamber with Rex at his side. The two of them streaked with mud and faint traces of dried blood. The room fell quiet. Even those who still doubted could feel the shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that the humans' actions were changing the rhythm of the war. Rex studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You've done more in 3 days than some of my brigades have done in 3 months. How?" Jack rested his rifle against the table and met the commander's gaze. "I don't fight their war. I make them fight mine." A murmur swept through the room. The Sierroth tactician leaned forward. "And how long can you keep doing this?" Jack glanced down at Rex, then back up. "Long enough." They didn't press him for details. Perhaps they sensed that asking for specifics would only yield answers they didn't want to hear, or wouldn't understand even if they did. Instead, they cleared space on the tactical board for his operations, marking enemy positions with subtle changes to account for his strikes. That night, he returned to the jungle. He set traps in the shallow waters of a river crossing, knowing the swarm would use it under the cover of darkness. He spiked water supplies with a chemical compound designed to induce disorientation in their physiology. He left false trails leading into areas rigged with explosives, forcing them to waste resources on phantom threats. Rex was more than a companion. He was a sensor, a warning system, a silent enforcer. Once, as they skirted the edge of a Kravos patrol, Rex froze, nose lifted. Jack trusted that signal without question, changing course instantly to avoid a hidden sentry post. That trust was mutual. The dog responded to his hand signals and tone alone, no wasted noise. Each day bled into the next, a rhythm of infiltration, strike, and disappearance. The swarm began to withdraw from certain zones entirely, unwilling to commit forces to areas they could no longer control. Alien intelligence officers traced the timing of these withdrawals and found they aligned almost exactly with Jack's operations. Even skeptics stopped calling it coincidence. But Jack knew he was only in the opening act. Fear was working its way into the swarm's ranks, but fear could fade if not fed. He would have to escalate, take them somewhere they thought they were safe, and prove no place was beyond his reach. He stood one evening on a ridge overlooking a Kravos staging ground. Hundreds of their soldiers gathered in organized rows, preparing for an assault on the Allied base. He studied their formation, the placement of their command cluster, the lines of retreat. His mind began arranging possibilities, routes in and out, weak points, opportunities to fracture their coordination. Rex leaned against his leg, eyes fixed on the enemy below. Jack rested a hand on the dog's head. "Tomorrow," he said softly. The next day would not be about cutting supply lines or scattering patrols. It would be about sending a message the swarm and the galaxy could not ignore. And as he slipped back into shadows, he was already thinking 3 moves ahead, the shape of the endgame beginning to form. The Kravos assault began under a moonless sky, their forces spilling from the jungle in disciplined waves. The forward base's perimeter lit with the flash and roar of energy fire, shield domes flaring under the impact. From the command deck, alien officers barked orders in a dozen languages, shifting units to hold the choke points. Yet even with their combined firepower, the sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm the defenses. Jack stood at the edge of the landing platform, helmet in place, rifle slung across his chest. Rex was at his side, hackles raised, silent but electric with readiness. He watched the battlefield without moving, studying the flow of the enemy. The Kravos weren't charging blindly. They were driving toward the command node, intending to decapitate the base's leadership. It was a bold, surgical move. And if it worked, the war here would be lost. Rex's voice cut through the chaos, tight with urgency. Human, if you have a plan, this is the time. Jack didn't answer immediately. He scanned the assault lines again, noting where their rear guard was thin, where their command relay pulsed faintly through the canopy haze. Hold the line, he said at last. 10 minutes. Without waiting for a reply, he turned and strode toward the dropship pads, not to board, but to retrieve the gear he'd stowed for this moment. Explosives, signal disruptors, a compact drone linked to the ghost knife in orbit. Each piece went into place with mechanical certainty. Then he and Rex vanished into the night. They moved along the ridge above the enemy's advance, staying in the folds of shadow between the bioluminescent plants. The sounds of battle rolled upward, distant, yet sharp enough to carry the panic of soldiers under siege. Jack counted his steps, measuring the minutes and heartbeats. The Kravos command cluster was hidden in a shallow basin, surrounded by thick guard lines. From above, he could see the central figure, a towering commander with mottled chitin, its limbs marked in white battle paint. Around it, relay nodes pulsed, transmitting orders to the assault force. Jack needed only to break the brain to scatter the body. He sent the drone ahead, its small frame flitting soundlessly between branches until it hovered above the relay network. With a flick of his wrist, he triggered the first detonation. 3 nodes went dark in the same instant, the basin lighting with the strobing flare of failing systems. Kravos' soldiers spun in confusion, their formation wobbling. Jack was already moving. He slid down the slope, rifle up, shots cutting through the nearest guards before they could react. Rex darted ahead, knocking a soldier to the ground with bone-cracking force. The commander turned, mandibles flaring in rage, but Jack's next burst shattered its primary limb joints. It collapsed with a hiss, still alive, but no longer issuing orders. The Kravos' lines began to crumble, their cohesion breaking without central control. Some fled into the jungle, others froze, and still others fought without coordination, easy prey for the Allied forces regaining ground at the base. Over comms, Jack heard the rising pitch of alien officers realizing what had happened. Push forward, Rex's voice roared. They're breaking. But Jack wasn't finished. He planted charges in the basin before withdrawing, each one calibrated to vaporize what remained of the command relay in the commander's body. As he and Rex climbed back to the ridge, the basin erupted behind them in a towering blossom of fire and debris. They returned to the base as the battle wound down. The shields still flickered, the air still smelled of scorched metal and alien ichor, but the Kravos' assault had been shattered. Soldiers stood in clusters, catching their breath, watching the jungle for any sign of return. When Jack appeared, heads turned. Some nodded in silent acknowledgement. Others simply stared. Rex approached, armor scorched and dented. For a moment, he said nothing, his red eyes fixed on the human. Then he inclined his head in a gesture that, for Zelrith, was as close to reverence as protocol allowed. "You did more than hold the line," he said. "You broke them." Jack shrugged off the praise. "They'll be back. Different plan, same goal. You have time now. Use it." The Siroth tactician stepped forward, her mandibles shifting in a pattern that conveyed both respect and unease. When you walked into their heart, they vanished. Evaporated. I've never seen the swarm react like that. Jack met her gaze without expression. Then you know what to expect next time. In the days that followed, the Council received detailed reports of the engagement. Footage from helmet cams and aerial drones showed the moment the Kravos lines collapsed, the basin going up in flames, the commander's body obliterated beyond recognition. The narrative spread quickly. One human, one dog, cutting the head off a force that had defied entire armies. On the council floor, Alara Voss listened to the playback of those reports with an unreadable expression. Delegates who had once mocked humanity now spoke in measured tones, some avoiding her gaze entirely. The first marshal of the Zelrith, who had led the earlier insults, remained silent throughout the session. When the meeting adjourned, Alara stepped outside onto one of the station's open observation decks. The stars stretched endlessly before her, sharp points of light in the void. She knew Jack would already be gone from Krylos 4, moving toward whatever front needed him next. That was the agreement. They would never own him, only ask, and if he answered, he would come. On the ridge above the base, Jack stood with Rex, watching the alien forces re-establish their lines. The air was quieter now, though the jungle still whispered with the movements of unseen creatures. He adjusted the strap on his rifle and scanned the horizon. There was no triumph in his expression, only the calm of a man who had done what needed to be done. Rex pressed against his leg, and Jack reached down to rest a hand on the dog's head. "Come on," he said quietly. "We're done here." They walked toward the waiting shuttle, the path lit faintly by the receding glow of the battle. Behind them, soldiers of half a dozen species watched in silence. Some saluted, others simply stood still, but none called out. As the shuttle's hatch closed, the base faded from view. The war would go on. Wars always did, but something had shifted. Humanity's place in the galactic order was no longer defined by doubt or dismissal. One man had redrawn the line. High above Krylos 4, the ghost knife broke atmosphere, engines flaring as it turned toward open space. Jack sat in the cockpit, Rex curled beside him, the stars ahead like a map of unfinished work. The galaxy didn't know where he was going next. Neither did the swarm. That uncertainty was the real weapon. Somewhere far behind in the halls of the council, they would remember the night the Kravos assault broke. Not because of fleets or armies, but because one human had walked into the dark and everything in his way had disappeared.